Okay, welcome everyone. I'm of Urban Studies. And speak about I-405 Freeway loop study that he has been participating in. So without further and I'll remind everyone for the webcast, if you ask a question, and I think we'll hold questions till the end, you need to use this microphone with the red light lit while you're speaking so people...
Important for me to make it very clear that I'm making this presentation to the Center for Transportation Studies only as a contribution to its educational mission. The Council has yet to approve the recommendations. I served as chairman of the group. As I said, my presentation is basically intended to provide insights on the issues and challenges facing the group that worked on the future of the loop as a contribution to the center. As chair, I was involved in several aspects of the technical work of the group. However, the full credit for the work that I'm presenting today to you here goes to the staff of the collaborating bureau, the Bureau of Planning, Bureau of Transportation of the City of Portland, and the Oregon Department of Transportation. More important, perhaps, to the 24 members of the group that contributed significantly of their time and of their ideas. FLAG completed its work in the spring of 2005, but its findings and final report are yet to be presented to the City Council. And as such, none of the things that I presented to you are final until the City Council goes through them and approves them. The Freeway Loop Group was established in the fall of 2003 by Mayor Vera Katz and ODOT Director Bruce Warner. Both of them are no longer in the agencies. It consisted of 24 individuals representing the many interests that are impacted and affected by the freeway system in general and the freeway loop in particular. Its mission was to consider the freeway loop's importance and future. The City of Portland Bureau of Planning, the Office of Transportation, and Oregon Department of Transportation provided the technical expertise and collaborated in conducting the study, assessing how the loop performs today and its likely performance in the future. We came with a number of findings, and I will highlight the one that's marked in red in front of you, largely because before we started the work of this group, there were ideas circulating in town as to whether the loop actually could be cut on the east side, that the loop could be eliminated in certain aspects of it to open it on the freeway. One of the important recommendations or the findings that we came with is that the freeway loop should remain even if major design changes are made to accommodate increased travel demand and other community objectives. Other findings, the loop's ability to move people and goods is critical to the economies of Portland, the region, the state, and actually the entire West Coast. The performance of the current loop will continue to deteriorate as local and regional travel demands increase. And at this point, I need only to remind you that there are major residential developments occurring around the downtown, that by all likelihood will result in increased job opportunities and increased residential demand. And given the fact that the loop handles not only regional travel but also local travel. As a matter of fact, the trips made on that loop that originate in downtown and end in some of the surrounding neighborhoods is a very significant number. So as those areas change, the pressure on the loop is likely to increase. The current design of the loop hinders high-quality urban development. It serves as a barrier. It, in some cases, is a visual barrier. In some other cases, it is a functional barrier. Long-term transportation, environmental, and land use decisions must be coordinated. That's another finding, that that when you deal with the future of the loop, you must pay attention to the land uses that are happening around that loop. There are many changes that are happening that requires now that we coordinate between land use decisions and transportation decisions. Two-lane segments consistently experience serious congestion and high crash rates. Another finding, without major improvements, the freeway loop cannot meet future regional travel needs, and that's a very important criterion to watch for. Finally, system improvements will require significant investments unavailable from existing resources. Costs would range from several hundred millions to several $billion, depending on which alternative that you will consider for improvements. We also came to the conclusion that if the future of the loop is to be addressed, the city, the state and the region need to ask several questions. The first question is, how can we develop a transportation system that meets the needs for efficient movement, strong urban form, and here I'm stressing strong urban form because of all the developments occurring around the loop, vibrant waterfront districts, livable neighborhoods, and a healthy economy. And at many points, these appear to be contradictory to each other, so it's very important for us to balance between the issues related to all of these. How will the East Bank contribute to riverfront vitality and in the future? This is, again, something that has consistently been raised since the 1980s. After the development that occurred on the west side of the river, improvements on the east side have become a major concern. There have been several attempts to examine the future of the East Bank Freeway. All of them focus on the need to open the river to the east side neighborhoods. How can the freeway and the riverfront successfully coexist? Can moderate improvements fix current problems? And that's giving the lack of resources that sometimes tend to be the most viable alternatives that we have. If the I-5 East Bank Freeway can be placed in a tunnel, how do we address the type, location, length, and I should add also, and the enormous cost? How will the overall loop function? How will projects be phased and prioritized? Should we decide on improvements, gradual improvements? How are they to be selected and how are they to be phased? How will short-term improvement projects be identified and implemented? How can freeway loop traffic, environmental and design studies be completed, including early focused work on the congested bottlenecks at the I-5, I-84 intersection? And that is, again, is an aspect of the freeway that is very significant to a number of businesses in the community, and it's a very important concern. Which project will be built first? How will this be funded? How can we start jump any projects that we are recommended? So there are a number of questions that were raised. Actually, the group that worked on the loop raised more questions perhaps than provided any answers. And if you are expecting that at the end of my presentation I will be telling you a solution that has come out of this group, we did not come with any specific solution. However, we believe that we have made some significant contributions to understanding what are the issues facing the loop, facing the city and the region. We made some specific recommendations in terms of future actions that needs to be taken. And the first one of them is to start planning now for short and long-term improvements. And I'm saying short-term and long-term because sometimes it's extremely very difficult to determine if you have a scenario that is a very long-term, how can you work toward that one if the short-term improvements actually will be in conflict with what you are doing. That has always been a dilemma for us in the group, and so there is a need for coordinating the short-term and long-term solutions. Find funding for the next phase, and the next phase that we are recommending is appointing a committee and actually starting a process for the development of a master plan that identifies future steps and future measures that needs to be taken. To move the project forward, we are recommending the initiation of a master plan, advance ongoing priority projects, complete the master plan before any major investments are made. So in essence, our hope is that a master plan could be developed sometime within the next couple of years. It's important now that I go into telling you what are the issues, specific issues that we address, that you keep in mind that the freeway loop was designed in the 1950s, and when it was designed, it was to become a part of an extensive network of freeways. It was not envisioned at that time that it will only be serving I-5 and I-84 and Highway 26 on the west. It was supposed to be the core of what would have been a very extensive network of freeways. Its history and what happened to the freeway loop really falls into or corresponds to a number of the changes that happened in this town and happened nationally in our perception of city planning. And let me start by the 1950s. That's when the loop was designed. That's the period in which the suburbs were growing, the car became supreme, and freeways became very popular. So in essence, freeway seems to have been the answer to all the problems facing the growing number of cars, the expanding suburbs, and that was the time during which the loop was designed. But the loop wasn't completed until actually sometime in the 1970s when the Fremont Bridge was completed. So in essence, as the loop was being gradually built, also things were happening around it. In the 1960s came the age of the urban renewal, and urban renewal which in many cities, luckily not in our city, but in many cities actually demolish the downtowns, and until today you still can see the negative impacts of urban renewal in many downtowns. In our case, we were fortunate in the sense that urban renewal was only applied to a small part of the downtown. It's interestingly that it is the part that we are sitting in now here. To the east, we have the Portland Center. To the west was Portland State. University of Portland State is an urban renewal project. But urban renewal resulted into major changes and actually began to contribute to changing perceptions of what's happening downtown among the public. Then came the 1970s, and for us in Portland, the 1970s were very exciting years. That's when in 1972 the downtown plan was developed, and a growing resentment against the freeways and actually movement away from them in many ways. Those of you, looking around, I don't see if any of you would remember in 1973, 74 that we did demolish a freeway. We are one of the, if not the first city in the country actually to demolish a functioning freeway, and that's the Harbor Drive freeway were replaced by the Tom McCall Park. So in essence, the downtown plan created very significant changes in our attitude. The Mount Hood freeway was stopped, replaced by investment in MAX. So there has been a number of changes happening in this town that actually began to impact the freeway loop, because as I said before, the loop was part of a system. Now the system is not being built intact. and as such, the loop has to perform functions that it was not designed for in the 50s. In the 1980s, we have the Central City Plan, the expansion of the Silicon Forest to the west, and the growing traffic demand coming on Highway 26. Again, pouring into the loop, going to the airport, and concern about the East Bank Freeway and its impact on the river began emerging, and there have been actually, I believe, 2 or 3 task forces that were appointed prior to the one that I chaired this time to address the question of what to do with the East Bank Freeway. In the 1990s, we have the River District, the Pearl, the West End, Metros 2040, and the expansion of light rail. And again, all these changes have had some impact, some of them positive in the sense that you can assume that light rail did reduce traffic somehow on the freeways. But there were also other developments that occurred that generated demand. In the present and the future, the challenge is considerable. We have 2 growing universities. Portland State University increased its enrollment by almost 60% in the last 10 years. Oregon Health Science University, while not increasing enrollment, increased its research activities and its employment significantly. Condominiums and emerging new residential areas are generating traffic demand. And the continuing metropolitan growth over the next 20 to 30 years, the Portland metropolitan area is expected to reach somewhere between 2.6, 2.7 to perhaps 3 million people. That's again a challenge that will be facing a freeway system that's not expanding to correspond to that kind of change. So going back to the freeways, it started with Robert Moses. Robert Moses arrived in town in 1943. His ideas for I-5, I-84, I-405 were built over the next 35 years. The loop was designed to address the needs of the 50s and reflected the prevailing values and attitudes of the time. But what existed before that, before the freeways? Portland actually had a fairly well-developed arterial system that was sufficient for a population of less than 1 million people. Obviously, nobody would argue that it would have been sufficient for the kind of population that we have today, but that is the situation that existed prior to the loop. If you look to the map to the right, you realize that when the loop was built, it actually cut into neighborhoods, and not only separated neighborhoods, but basically made many of them inaccessible. The freeways were built without any consideration to what's happening around them. This one was not built, but this is the Mount Hood Freeway. But the location was primarily based on the convenience for the traffic, and not necessarily addressing the impact on the surrounding areas. And let me say that this is not something that was unique to Portland, Oregon, or unique to us. That's something that happened nationally at a fairly large scale. And as a matter of fact, again, I have to say that we fared much better than many other cities on this account. This is actually the area of where Portland State is. So urban renewal came in the 1960s. The loop was being built. At the same time, many of the existing neighborhoods were being demolished to be replaced by either high-rise or by the academic facilities of the university. In its current form, the loop remains a visual and functional barrier in many of its segments, and you can see actually the significance of the visual barrier is already beginning to be felt if you notice the developments that are occurring in the South Shore area, and how the freeway and the Markham Bridge actually cut them visually from the rest of the downtown. So the freeway loop is a very significant barrier, but given everything that I have said about its significance and importance for the economy, what you are doing there is eventually the future is going to be trade-offs between how you can balance the two considerations. the same time, in the 1970s, as a result of the 1972 plan, we became very much concerned about quality spaces. And quality spaces actually were reflected on the kind of development that we did downtown. The Pioneer Square was developed. It actually excited the imaginations of what other improvements. Let me say the Transit Mall was also built in the 1980s, completed in the early 80s. And the city was moving in a direction we're focusing on the quality of the spaces for public gatherings and public enjoyment. And all this was happening while the east Bank Freeway is standing on the river, blocking the other side of the river, and major concerns were being raised at that time. And that became significant if you consider that when we removed the Harbor Drive Freeway, which is actually located in the area that you see on the picture now, it was replaced by a park and opened the west side to the river, and considerable pressure was continuously mounting and being raised as to what to do with the east bank of the river. To do our work, we did engage in a number of analyses. We did employment and household analysis, space utilization, and we also examined other cities' experiences to see what kind of experiences other cities faced in trying to deal with similar situations to what we have here. I'm going to go and show you some of the analysis that we conducted, but given the fact that actually I almost consumed half the time that I have, and I still have the majority of my slides, I will not be examining in detail any of the statistics or the numbers that appear there. The report of the task force or the group, after it goes to the City Council, I assume will become public. It's a 70-page report. So in essence, hopefully sometime within the next 2 or 3 months, a much bigger and detailed report could be available from the city that gives you many of this information. The first thing that we engage in is understanding Portland policy projections. Actually, we examined the potential for growth of household and employment in the city. So we examined the various areas of the downtown neighborhoods, and we identified the potential growth. But at the same time, we did take Metro's Sunrise employment. So in instance, we used 2 sets of information taken from the policy projections of the city of Portland and information taken from Metro. And we also relied on some analysis conducted by the late Graham Clark regarding the space allocation, the space potential for growth and redevelopment in the downtown and the surrounding areas. So in essence, the kind of analysis that were conducted actually by the staff are very extensive analysis elaborating on the potential that exists around the loop. And so we did our modeling based on 2 assumptions, and the 2 assumptions are actually based on what kind of investments will be available for improving transportation in the region. One of them basically relied on a constrained investments assumption that will result only in new light rail going to Milwaukee and Clackamas. The aerial tram will be built for OHSU, the Portland streetcar to the south, the interstate bridge capacity unchanged, and the Sunrise corridor to southeast 122nd. We had another assumption based on a preferred system that entailed greater investments in light rail to Vancouver, bus rapid transit on Barber, interstate bridge, additional lanes, and Sunrise corridor to US 26. At the same time, as I mentioned, we did examine some of the experiences of other cities of how to deal with the freeways that they have. Columbus, Ohio actually had a very interesting situation where they used the bridges over the freeway, they expanded them, and they created commercial space over the freeway. They didn't cover the freeway completely the same way Mayor Katz wanted the freeway to be the I-405, but they did do some modifications of that by creating actually commercial activities so that the streets are not interrupted and the freeway impact becomes minimized. Duluth, Minnesota, where a new park and several new cuts and cover tunnels actually were built in the city. You can see the picture self. And Cincinnati did the same thing. They have a stadium. They have actually the freeway covered in some areas, and a park. Again, development, recreational developments were created over it. Hartford, Connecticut, connected the river. Actually, they basically had a situation similar to the one that we have on the East Bank, and what they did is that they covered over that area in order to provide sloping access to the river, so you go over the freeway, and that's a situation that I'm not sure is 100% applicable to what we have here. But again, we did examine what other cities have done in similar situations to what we have. The famous Embarcadero Freeway in San Francisco was demolished, and I would like actually just as a kick to our colleagues from San Francisco to say that we did remove our Harbor Drive Freeway before San Francisco removed the Embarcadero. So in essence, we yeah. So in essence, we have a better record on that account. But they removed the freeway to the south in San Francisco, and obviously the one example that we examined, and I have to say have weighed very heavily on in our minds in the working of this group, has been the Boston experience. And the reason I'm saying it has weighed very heavily on us is that all of you are aware that was a project to tunnel a freeway in the waterfront in Boston that started as an investment of $3 billion, and thanks to the former Speaker of the House from Boston, it kept growing, and I think is not yet completed, and it's already up to $11 or $12 billion. So in essence, every time we talked about major investments happening here, we had to keep in mind that similar experiences actually led to situations that were unmanageable. And in essence, the Boston experience was a sobering experience for many of us who, on that group, would have liked to push aggressively for a long tunnel down. So in essence, the one thing I'll have to say about this group is that we were not out there to try to come with solutions that are not implementable. We were very much concerned about realistic scenarios that will satisfy as much as possible all the objectives that we have for the study. We started the work on this group, and as I said, the group consisted of 24 individuals representing various interests in the community that relate to the future of the freeway and the loop. And to some extent, the group was fairly balanced between those who felt very strongly about the need for something very drastic, visionary changes to the loop, either tunneling it or removing it, and others who have concerns about the viability of the loop as an important transportation link for trucking and for regional travel. And so when we started, we decided that it will be important for us before we go into examining alternatives and examining scenarios that could be divisive in the way they are being presented, to have the group reach an agreement on three basic principles. You call them policy imperatives. They were in reality principles that we had the group agree on, so that those principles will guide everything that we do later. So in essence, those principles were adopted very, very early in the process of the work of the group. And the first one of them is that I-5 405 freeway loop should not be the bottleneck in the regional freeway system. So in essence, the freeway loop has to continuously be improved or maintained on whatever design done to it, to make sure that it is not a bottleneck impacting the entire region. The second principle was the freeway loop investments support economic activities and new investments in the central city and industrial areas, and support regional and state land use and economic goals and policies. And again, that basically is a principle intended to open the door for understanding the relationship between the loop and land use scenarios that exist around it. Finally, the freeway loop investments should be part of a balanced transportation strategy for highway, transit, freight, bicycle, and pedestrian movements. Travel demand management will continue to be undertaken to encourage the use of alternative modes and to promote a compact urban area. So in essence, these were, believe me, they sound benign on the surface, those three principles, but I see two of my colleagues who work with us in this group are here with us. They can testify to the fact that that these principles were very, very important because they made everybody who has different views on things feel at least that part or aspects of their views are being accounted for in the work of the group. We came with a number of concepts in the early stages of the development of the alternatives. And we came with 6 alternatives. Some of them may appear to you as far-fetched, but at that time we were not interested really of what is practical and what is not. We were interested in identifying for the group all the possible scenarios that can occur. So the first scenario is it's not exactly, in planning, in city planning, when we do plans and then we say, and this is the no planning scenario, the do nothing scenario, that actually modest improvement is not a do nothing scenario. That's a do something scenario, but a do something that is fairly modest. Basically, it retains the existing system alignment the same with limited improvements throughout. Braided ramps in Rose Quarter area separating Broadway, Widler from I-84, the freeway caps over I-405 and the East Bank freeways. Again, that was a modest contribution by the group to some of the concerns that are being raised about accessibility and visual impairments that existed. Ramp reconfigurations at Broadway, ramp closures around East Markham connection to McLaughlin, and again I would like to say that the East Bank connection to McLaughlin in all the various task forces that I served on in the past, and I have served on another one before that dealing with the East Bank Freeway, the McLaughlin connection has always been a very contentious, very significant demand by the Central East Side Industrial Council and the industrial development there. So in essence, this scenario will accommodate it. The issues and opportunities that this scenario raises is the concept is relatively inexpensive and easily staged, and does not address system capacity shortcomings. The Rose Quarter Light District with the ramps expand horizontal impact of the freeway, so in essence there would have been improvements there. It does not improve connections in South Downtown area. Braided ramps may require existing barrier to be enlarged. No change to existing UPRR, that's the Union Pacific Railroad alignment on the east side. And Connections made or lost as a result of this scenario are limited reconnection of the east side districts to the Willamette River, which means that those who were concerned about or who are concerned about opening the river to the neighborhoods will not really get much satisfaction from this scenario. East Markham connection to McLaughlin is provided, but design not determined. We did not deal with any design issues, by the way, in the work of this group. Diminished access to surface grid near Portland State, and improvements to function of Broadway Wadler interchange. So there were some improvements. There were some issues that will not be addressed. And then the second scenario was one of the what I will call the extreme scenarios, actually, that were being discussed at one point in town, and that's the scenario of taking I-5, channeling it through I-405, and in essence I-405 become I-5, and the freeway on the east disappears. So I-5 connects directly, I-5 north connects directly to I-84, I-5 south connects to I-405, and it's replaced on the east side by surface streets. Concept description: the freeway section is removed. Existing I-405 is, as I said, redesignated as I-5. The Markham Bridge no longer serves as a freeway, so technically speaking, the Markham Bridge can serve as a local arterial street connecting the central east side to the south downtown. New arterial connection to I-84 at Sullivan Gulch provides central east side access, and no change to the existing Union Pacific Railroad alignment. Opportunities and issues raised here: facilitates full access to the Willamette River. So obviously that's the scenario that would have opened the entire east side to the river. Although the railroad will still remain a barrier, because the railroad is a functioning railroad, and no recommendation in this scenario were to remove the railroad. It reduces freeway system capacity significantly and requires widening horizontal or vertical the new I-5, which means the I-405 would have had to be widened, and that again is something that would have been a significant investment. It creates bottlenecks at US 26 interchange, and connections made or lost. South downtown area access is improved through arterial bridge connection. The south waterfront area is reconnected to adjacent area north and south, because all that spaghetti that is leading to the Markham Bridge would have disappeared. So in essence, there are some improvements on the land use side, but there are some potential serious problems on the transportation side. A third scenario dealt with extended viaduct, and basically what we were talking in this scenario here is in two alternative locations, and we did not select any one location in it, but as you can notice, there are two alternative locations. The freeway will be even raised further higher up than its existing level. By raising higher up, you actually make ground connection to the river under the freeway. So the viaduct alignment could actually be over the Union Pacific Railroad, so to the extent you can address the future of the two together. But we did realize that the viaduct will be very high enough to clear Belmont and Martin Luther King and Morrison ramps, which basically meant that viaduct would have to be more than 70 feet high. That's a very significant, actually, you may be opening the surface connection on the east side, but in reality what you will be doing is putting that freeway in the site of Mount Hood or any of the other visuals. So in essence, that's a third scenario there. The issues and the opportunities: it reconnects east side districts to the Willamette River. but the railroad will remain on First Avenue. Visual impact is substantial, especially on the Mount Hood downtown connection, and it does not address barriers in the south waterfront area. Connections made or lost, no significant changes to the existing system. So in essence, this scenario would have basically kept most of the connections, ramps on and off that exists, the same thing. The fourth scenario is a very, again, another extreme scenario in the sense that we were removing the freeway, or you can remove the freeway on the east side completely and replace it by a very long tunnel that crosses under the river. And if you do this, you realize that the tunnel actually had to start somewhere from near Portland State University here, and somewhere to the south on I-5, where very close to where actually the new campus of OHSU is going to be emerging, and then we'll continue underground. The alignment that we had there is just an alignment. As I said, we did not do any specific design, so in essence, a long tunnel could be in any other alternative alignment. But it goes all the way as a tunnel until it connects with I-5 North and connects with I-84. That's a very significant change to the loop. It has advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, from the visual side and the land use side, it provides a superior improvements on the surface because everything has gone underground. But on the other hand, it creates some very significant problems also, in the sense that we do not allow hazardous material to go into tunnels. So any hazardous material traveling on I-5 or from Highway 26 going to I-84 or I-5 will have to get out of the freeway and find other alternatives. So that, but it also could have, if you couple it with improvements on the surface, creating new arterial connections between the east and the west, you can actually reduce the volume of local traffic that uses the loop, in the sense that a scenario like this requires not only that you build a tunnel, but you also make major improvements to the surface traffic that is crossing. As I said, it basically very significant for removing the barriers that you face. Its major significant are the disruptions that it actually can do to this town during the construction, and as I will come back to it later on, the cost of it. The cost is obviously very significant, but it allows, it solves problems. It allows direct access from the Ross Island Bridge to the west. It opens back the neighborhoods that the loop separated back in the 1950s, in the sense that the South Portland areas, CTLH, that's the Corbett, Terwilliger, Lear Hill neighborhood, could become back connected to the downtown, and actually may remove existing barriers between the Rose Quarter and the rest of the Lloyd Center. So in essence, there are significant improvements of it, assuming that the resources to do a scenario like this are available, and we know that the resources are not. There are also some connections that could be lost as a result of a tunnel like this. The I-5 Morrison Bridge connection to the central east side and downtown would be lost. There are very significant limitations to how many on-off ramps that you can make through a tunnel, even though I have seen tunnels that have actually on and off situations. Montreal has a 3-mile tunnel that has on and off ramps, but it's not constrained the same way that this tunnel will be constrained. So in essence, there are limitations. Existing Markham Bridge piers may allow an arterial if you lower that bridge and you still use the piers that are there. You can have a new bridge there easier. South downtown access to New Markham area tunnel appear difficult due to grades, which basically means that those of us who work in this part of the downtown and take the loop in order to go to the Light Center may find that scenario not available if you have a tunnel situation. We also examined another alternative which would have solved the problems of visual access on the east side, but not necessarily the visual access in the south waterfront area, and that's crossing or lowering the Markham Bridge and then going into 3 tunnels. This scenario actually would have addressed also the railroad situation as a barrier. And you go into 3 tunnels on the east side. These will be shorter tunnels. The cost will be more manageable. The disruption by all likelihood will be less. And many of the problems that of connections that the long tunnel does not address actually could be addressed in the situation of 3 different tunnels on the east. And we did examine all these implications. There are a number of issues. The I-5 hits grade at Hawthorne. If existing viaduct was removed, Freeway could need to cross above it. 3rd Avenue rail tunnel likely requires pumps to overcome drainage issues. So in essence, there are problems of infrastructures. Tunnel would require monitoring and special drainage containment systems. Connections made or lost. McLaughlin connection to I-5 appears doable near OMSI. But we didn't stop on improvements that require different constructions. We also examined one alternative scenario for the loop that actually it didn't occur. I never thought of it until the consultant and the staff that worked on this came with the idea. And in many ways, the ideas, if you think of it, makes some sense. It creates some significant problems, however, for people living on the south. But that idea is to turn the loop into a one-way direction. In essence, you use the entire width of the existing freeway as a one-way street. So it's a one-way direction loop going. It's a counterclockwise loop. You come on I-5 and you are going to the airport or going to I-5 North, no problem. You just go straight the way you do it today. But coming from I-5 North and heading south, you will have to go on the Fremont Bridge and come on I-405. And again, each one of those will become a one-way street. There were a couple of areas in which we would still have to rely on 2 ways. One of them actually is the southern part of the I-405 to provide the connection to Highway 26. But it was a very interesting idea, and but we did not make really any major decisions as to whether which of these alternatives should be selected. We instead made decisions as to which alternatives we should be moving forward, and so for further studies. And so, as I said, when I started my presentation, we did not intend and we did not make any recommendation to say, here is the scenario that should be made. There was a previous similar group to this one that was created by Charlie Hills and the City Council back in 1991, 92, I believe, and I did serve on that group. And that one came with a very specific solution, one single solution recommendation to the City Council, It didn't pass City Council, but that solution was actually for removal of the East Bank and building a tunnel further to the east of where it is located now. This group did not choose to go in that direction. We are not making any specific recommendations. The reason is that we didn't feel that we truly have all the technical know-how or the resources to conduct the kind of work and analysis and that will be required to justify going with a very drastic solution like the tunnel or a modest solution like the modest improvements. Instead, we selected three alternatives. The group felt fairly comfortable going forward in front of the City Council with those alternatives. And in reality, the alternatives are not even binding on any of the future players that will prepare the master plan. So in essence, those alternatives are being presented as illustrations of the kind of things that that a future task force or a study on preparing a master plan for the system can actually address. In essence, we are providing some groundwork for the next step. We selected three of the six. The first one was the modest improvements. And as you notice, the attractiveness of the modest improvements, that is that we estimated its cost to be somewhere between $275 to $450. And that is in 2003 dollars. So it's within the realm of previous investments that we have done on the loop or on the I-5. So in essence, there is nothing really that outrageous about the kind of investments that will be required to do this kind of improvements. The second scenario that we selected, again as an illustration of things that to be explored, is, and again here I have to defend ourselves on the group. We weren't really trying to do what sometimes we planners are being accused of, and that's to select two extreme scenarios, one on the right and one to the left. Both of them are extreme in order to justify what we really think should happen, which is somewhere in the middle between the two of them. That's not what we were doing. There are significant interests in this community in covering the freeway or tunneling it or whatever. So in essence, we are not presenting it as a scenario that cannot happen. But that is too radical that it cannot happen. But we are presenting it also with its realistic drawbacks and costs. So the cost is somewhere between $3 to $6 billion, and that is again in 2003 dollars in essence. That's a fairly expensive scenario. The third scenario that we pushed forward was the one-way loop at a cost of about $450 million. Now, why did we select these scenarios and what did we do with them? We obviously choose not to do detailed modeling on all the six scenarios. So in essence, the three ones that were selected here, we did carry on them slightly more elaborate modeling analysis and studies on them to understand their implications. We did not invest the same time on the other three alternatives that we ruled out. So in essence, that is basically what the task force or the group has worked on. It was a fairly educational process for all of us who engaged in it. And before I conclude, I will just say that I believe that the report that will be presented to the City Council at one point sometime, hopefully within the next couple of months, is a very significant document. It attests to the quality of the staff work that went in it, and actually to the commitment of the 24 members of that group, where discussions heated some time? Yes, the discussions were heated. Did I, as a chair, come very close to raising my hand and giving up at one point? Yes, I did that. But I'll tell you, I never regretted actually being involved in this process. I learned a great deal from it, and I believe that the group is to be commended for having presented to the city some realistic alternatives to understand really what is the role of that loop and what should be happening to it in the future. It's a very significant transportation link, and I'm not sure that that just pretending that as long as it's functioning, we don't need to do anything about its future. I think that will be very reckless from us. It's the only connection that connects all the freeway systems in this region, and its future is very significant to all of us. And as I said, it's very significant locally, but it's obviously more important regionally. We don't have any, I mean, I-405 may have reduced the pressure on it to some extent, but based on the analysis that I have seen, and actually there are two of the individuals who provided all this technical work that I presented to you today are sitting with us here, and they can attest to the fact that I-405 did. I think without I-405 the problem would have been significantly much more worse, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it reduced the load on the loop that significantly. So I think that's basically all what I have to tell you. Again, I just will remind you that I gave you a presentation basically for your information, but it is a presentation that has yet to be made to the City Council. So I think that's, so there are no final decisions that are made as a result of this situation. And I understand you take questions?
Yes, we have time for questions, and I'll remind people to use the microphone. Mine's not working, but use the microphone when nearby.
Are there any foreseeable benefits? I mean, have you guys projected any numbers towards the benefits that some of these improvements will bring?
Costs and benefits that they improve. I don't believe we did engage in those kind of analysis, and as I said, our recommendation is to commission a study for which we are hoping that the city will request funds, federal funds, that will conduct more elaborate analysis really about the impact. I should say, however, that many of the analysis that we conducted relative to the potential growth of traffic on that very clearly point to the fact that the loop could become a very significant bottleneck. And so while we did not examine in specific dollars and cents the economic impact, it doesn't really take much effort to realize that there will be some adverse impacts happening to this area if the loop becomes a bottleneck, more than what it is. I mean, at certain periods during the day, the loop is a significant bottleneck today. Yes.
Which of the alternatives of the final three do you think would be the most feasible and the one that could actually bring more benefit to the region?
I don't know what's the most feasible. It's very difficult for me to answer this question because I can answer it. I have been, my involvement in this community and this state has identified me as a person who's continuously pushing for visions. So if you identify me as such, then obviously I will say that the long tunnel is by all likelihood is the best long-term solution for this community. But then I will have to turn around and ask you, and where do we find $6 billion to build that long tunnel? So in essence, a vision that is not realistic, that does not go that far. So that's perhaps one thing that I have to tell you is that you can be as visionary as you want to be, but if your vision cannot be implemented, it's only going to be your vision on paper. So you have to be realistic also. I mean, vision has to be realistic. I will hate to say that the modest improvements is the most feasible. It's the most feasible from dollars and cents scenario, but it's not necessarily the most feasible for the very, very long term, for one simple reason, that you could find yourself over a 20 or 30-year period investing almost as much as you're investing in a tunnel, because structures have limited age. The Markham Bridge is already coming very close to its design age, so which means that there have to be some major work on the Markham Bridge. The Fremont Bridge is much newer, so in essence is likely not to be a problem for some time. But there are areas of the loop that will require some major investments within the next 20 years. So that I'm honest in trying to answer your question. I have to say that the one-way loop it has some serious problems with it. So the most feasible scenario, by all likelihood, is a scenario that will result in some major reconfiguration of the freeway on the east side, maybe a shorter tunnel than the long tunnel. But we did not address those issues because, as I said, we were not a design group. We were not a group that actually was making decisions on behalf of the Oregon Department of Transportation, which eventually will have to address the design issues. So basically, we were just putting ideas on the table. We were not presenting specific designs for the community. So, yes.
Is there some particular reason that the city council is reluctant to hear this, or is it just the slowness of the process?
No. It's just the process. I actually did approve the letter of transmittal for the report, so I don't believe that there is any reluctance. Yes.
Have you given any thought to using tolling as a way of funding a tunnel project?
Using tolling? I think those ideas are floating around the community, but I don't believe that they were discussed in the committee. Steve, do you recall that we discussed them? I don't believe we...
Those are implementation strategies, either finance it or
No.
we didn't get that. This is more of a policy level concept discussion.
Yes, please.
What percentage of traffic has an origin or a destination kind of within this immediate loop area that's using the loop today?
I know that it is significant, but Steve, do you recall the number?
It actually was a fairly large percentage of the trips either had an origin or a destination within the freeway. I didn't bring the report with me, so I don't remember the percentage. Fred?
It's a very significant.
50%.
Yeah.
But also the average trip length was very long, just like in the 16 to 17 mile was the average trip length as well. So it's an indication of the regional nature of the facility, but it also had trips coming from quite far with a destination within the central city or an origin in the central city.
Yes.
I have a follow-up to that. Knowing that there's a lot of through traffic, for example, people going from Beaverton out towards the airport, was there any consideration given to improving alternate routes so people won't have to drive through the downtown loop to get from east to west?
Yes, I believe that issue was brought up in the conversations. We, however, our charge did not give us the authority to actually deal with any recommendations outside the freeway loop. But it's not an issue that we assume that it does not exist. Yes, some of these issues were raised in the deliberations. Yes.
Was the metro model at all applied to any of these alternatives, and if so, which alternative performed the best?
Yes.
We didn't use the Metro model for our analysis. So we used the base year of 2030 was our forecast year, and the congestion, as you can anticipate, in 2030 is quite significant. So the tunnel, the long tunnel option, had the best overall performance. That it pretty much maintained the current year 2000 level of congestion with the long tunnel in terms of overall travel time, but also has, as Dr. Toulan said, the greatest cost. The modest option was pretty much the same level of congestion as the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but in terms of the amount of congestion or parts of the freeway loop that was over capacity was pretty much the whole system with the modest or the RTP. The tunnel option was addressing quite a few bottlenecks. So the bottleneck between I-84 and I-5 and 405 and the Fremont were actually operated on the current plan. So given a 30-year forecast, that's pretty good.
Yes.
Yes, I noticed that the low-end price tag for the full tunnel in Portland was about the same as the projected cost of the Big Dig in Boston. I was wondering if this project in Portland would be as extensive as Boston's, and if Boston's financial problems completing that project were taken into consideration with this estimate for the full tunnel.
Well, as I said when I came to the picture of Boston, I said that while we were very much impressed and influenced by the success of similar attempts in other cities, but every time we look to the Boston situation, it weighed very heavily on our mind, the experiences with that big dig that they have there. The lower estimate, $3 billion, yes, is equivalent to what the big dig started with 15 years ago. Remember that they started 15 years ago. The fact that it took them 15 years to complete the project, that's the reason why, I remember construction costs went significantly every year, so is that the reason why it went, I don't know the details of what really the problems that happened there. But should this community decide to adopt a tunnel for the freeway, there will have some very realistic safeguards to ensure that the cost overruns do not produce a similar situation. I have to say, however, that keep in mind that technology keeps changing, and until very recently, you can bore in the rock underground, what has to be done, because if you have to cross the river, but only up to 2 lanes for every tunnel. I believe that we have the technology today to bore for a tunnel that will accommodate 3 lanes. Obviously, it could be slightly more expensive, but you don't need to have 3 tunnels to produce 6 lanes, as I have seen in similar situations. You can actually have 2 tunnels with 6 lanes. But again, keep in mind, these cost estimates were not done on the basis of an actual design that we have prepared for the tunnel, and we understand exactly. These are purely estimates that were prepared by the staff to the best of their ability based on comparison situations. We did not have anybody get actual quotations or understanding of really how much it costs. These are just estimates being provided so that you know the differences between the alternatives should you decide to go through any one of them. But But as far as I'm concerned, and I'm here, I believe that I will not be only reflecting my own views, but I will be reflecting the views of the staff that worked on this project, as well as the committee, that the greatest challenge facing this community is really how you can develop a desirable long-term scenario that you want to accomplish. But you know that you're not going to accomplish it before 20 or 25 years, and at the same meantime continue to do improvements for the existing loop and freeway, because you want those loop and freeway to continue functioning. So in essence, so if there is any lesson to be learned out of this, and since we are in an academic setting at this point here, the one lesson I have to say is that when you go out designing a project, please do it right from the first time, because the consequences of trying to improve it later on or to change it later on are just simply horrendous. So there are major challenges. You cannot, and the group concluded that we have to continue with the short-term improvements in the existing loop and the existing freeway, because we cannot afford to have traffic and movement come to a standstill. But in some cases, you know that you are going to be improving a segment of a freeway that if you are going 10 years later to put it in a tunnel, you will be useless for you. So there is a very significant dilemma there, that when you are dealing with situations like this. And that brings me to the point that in reality, the one thing I appreciate about all the work that was done on this group is that really the challenge was significant. Is how can you keep a transportation system functioning continuously, and while at the same time talking about what is the long-term vision, and how do you reconcile the long-term vision with the need to keep the system functioning intact, and add a third dimension to that, and you don't have all the money in the world to pour in that project. So that's yes.
For the existing constraints that require the Markham Bridge to be at its current elevation still in place, the bridge be lowered, and was that alternative considered?
Well, the one thing I will only say about this is that the Markham Bridge was built as high as it was built because the Zidel shipyard insisted that they must have access to ocean-going boats. So that's why the Markham Bridge was built as high as it is. I have not been monitoring traffic on the river, so I don't know whether there has been ocean-going boats that crossed under the Markham Bridge to reach the Zidel or not. But I suspect if you want an answer to that, you can research it yourself. But the answer is, I suspect that if you can lower the Markham Bridge as long as you leave it high enough for the Portland Spirit to pass from under it, or to any of the other Columbia River cruise boats to pass under it, but not, you don't need it the height that it is now. Yes.
Have concerns, especially at the federal level since 9/11, about security and terrorism diminished? I mean, did anybody on this group express concerns about tunneling, or, I mean, there have been accidents and fires on I-405 in the past. Was that a concern?
Well, it's always a concern. As I mentioned to you, one of the problems of the tunnel, of course, is what do you do with trucks carrying hazardous material that are currently not even allowed on the tunnel under the Portland Heights, on High 26. I'm not sure that the question of terrorism came very specifically in our discussions, largely because we really were not we were focusing on schematic alternatives. We weren't focusing on final solutions or final designs. So in essence, I assume that a question like that will have to be addressed by the next group that will be appointed to examine this situation in much greater depth and details. But yes, my answer, however, is that look how many tunnels we have around this country. So in essence, this is not going to be a significant addition to the number of tunnels that exist in the country. So yes.
Would tunneling the freeway create some perhaps valuable real estate above it that could be part of a financing mechanism sometime?
Well, people who argue for that will present this as an argument, yes. That actually removing, it's not necessarily the tunneling, because you could be tunneling under an existing street. So technically you will not, but when you remove, if you tunnel and then you remove the existing freeway, you will be vacating enough real estate that it could be used to finance part of the cost of the. So some of these issues, let me put it this way. Groups in this town that have been advocating and pushing for the tunnel have actually used this argument very successfully in presenting their case.
Okay. Before we thank Dr. Toulan, I want to make upcoming announcements. Next week is actually a campus holiday, Veterans Day, so we will have no seminar. The following week, Friday, November 18th, we'll have Matthew Kitchen from the Puget Sound Regional Council talking about Seattle's value pricing demonstration project. Should be quite interesting, issues of tolling, pricing, etc. And at this point, I want to thank Dr. Toulan for his talk.
Thank you.